Korvold, Fae-Cursed King, is my new favorite EDH general. Sacking things, drawing cards, bringing things back, punishing our opponents. Let's talk about the deck, and it starts right now. Hello and welcome to the day. Thank you for spending your time with us. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. I am Joel. If this is your first time visiting us and you want to stay up to the minute with the latest deck strategy for Standard, Pioneer, EDH, and Brawl, MTG Finance news, or you just want to watch us open boosters, make sure you subscribe before you leave. Let's jump into the deck tech for Korvold, Fae-Cursed King. This is the entire deck. Make sure that you check out the companion video to this piece, which has an entire free-for-all game in it, and it is awesome. Make sure you go check that out. So, let's start and look at our rows. In this row here, we've got our ramp. In this, we've got some utility stuff that we'll get back to. Over here, we've got graveyard interaction because we are sacrificing permanents with Korvold, and we want to be able to get some value out of that. Up in this row, we've got sacrifice enablers. There are moments where Korvold only sacrifices stuff when he enters the battlefield or when he attacks. But we've got the ability to sack stuff, and we're creating all this stuff that we can sack. If Korvold's on the battlefield, it essentially acts as card draw dig. So if we need an answer, we can activate any of these four and we can dig. On this row, we've got creators of things that we can sack, either creature tokens, treasure tokens, things like that. Over here, we've got cards that are sacrifice value. So anytime we sacrifice a card or a creature, like with Judith, it's dealing 1 damage to any target. Same with Poison Tip Archer, Vindictive Vampire, cards like that. We'll go through those. In this row, we've got our removal, either targeted or board wipe. Now, what we try and do with any of our picks for any of these different categories of spells that we have in Korvold is make sure it plays with the sacrifice theme in some way. So let's go through the cards. We'll bounce through the ramp really quick first. Soul Ring, obviously. Wayfarer's Bauble searches up a card. Farseek searches up a card. Rampant, same thing. Dawntreader Elk, sacrifice. It dies if Korvold's on the battlefield. We net a card and we go search for a land. So Crow Tribe Elder, same thing. Sacrifice, we can go search for a land. Harrow, we're sacrificing lands to go get 2 lands. Cultivate, straight up ramp spell. Primal Growth, kicker, sack a creature. We have so many enablers and value outlets in this deck for sacrifice that if we draw this late game, it's not too terrible that we're drawing just a ramp spell late in the game. Springbloom Druid enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice land. Again, if we draw it late, it's great. Commander Sphere, we get to add mana. Also, we can sacrifice it once we got Korvold on the battlefield. And Dockside Extortionist. Extortionist is some early ramp for me, especially in that free-for-all that I've got the gameplay on the channel. Make sure you go check that out. If anybody gets too ahead of us with Mana Rocks, we play Extortionist and we can kind of play catch-up. Plus, we can get Korvold on the battlefield early and we can sack the treasure tokens if we want to. So, next up, things that create sackable stuff for us. Sifter of Skulls. Whenever a non-token creature dies, create a 1/1. Perfect. Catacomb Sifter. When it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1. Whenever another creature you control dies, scry 1. Beautiful. Savvy Hunter's creating food for us when it attacks or blocks. Plus, it's a little bit of a sack outlet, so it could go in this stack because we can sacrifice 2 foods and draw a card. 3 cards with Korvold on the battlefield. Angrath is going to make our Korvold Menace, which is huge. Also, it creates tokens that can get sacked. Gluttonous Trolls enter the battlefield. We get food tokens equal to the number of opponents we have. Hopefully 2, at least 3, something like that. Also, it can be a sacrifice outlet as well. Sack a non-land permanent. Gluttonous Troll gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Rapacious Dragon enters the battlefield. 2 treasure tokens. We can sack those at instant speed. Treasure tokens are beautiful for Korvold decks. Endrick Sar, whenever you cast a creature spell, make 1/1s equal to that CMC, and if you control 7 or more, you gotta sack him. Great, repeatable effect for us to create thralls, sack them to Korvold. Pawn of Ulamog, same thing. Whenever it or another non-token creature dies, create a sackable creature. Ulvenwald Mysteries. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, create a clue, sack a clue, create a 1/1. We're getting double duty out of Ulvenwald Mysteries. Awakening Zone is going to create a sackable at the beginning of the beginning of our turns. Krenko is going to create multiple, hopefully, 1/1 tokens every time it attacks. Prosh is going to create at least 6 0/1 sackable creatures when you play it. Plus, it's an instant speed sack outlet if we've got a dig, because you can sacrifice another creature for no cost. And Brass's Bounty. Brass's Bounty is an all-star in this deck. 7 mana. If you don't cheat it in, you're getting 7 treasure tokens. Perfect. So beautiful for this deck. Let's talk about the payoffs. Moldervine Reclamation is going to be kind of doubling Korvold's ability. When a creature you control dies, draw a card. Smothering Abomination, sack a creature at the beginning of upkeep. When you sack a creature, draw a card. We're creating a ton of 1/1s. We can stand to do that. Vindictive Vampire, whenever another creature you control dies, it deals 1 to each opponent and you gain 1 life. If we have multiple opponents in play, this is huge. This is absolutely huge. We can just be sniping our opponents. Poison Tip Archer, same thing. Whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses a life. Absolutely enormous, plus the reach and death touch can really pay off sometimes. Sir Conrad, whenever a creature dies or a creature is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Plus, we can just be dumping stuff into our graveyard so that some of our graveyard payoff cards might work out as well. Pitiless Plunderer. Whenever another creature you control dies, create a treasure token. Perfect. Zulaport Cutthroat, kind of doubling down on Vindictive Vampire's ability. Each opponent loses a life and you gain a life whenever a creature you control dies. Mayhem Devil. In standard right now, works perfectly for this deck. Whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, deals 1 damage to any target. And Judith. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Judith deals 1 damage to any target. Judith's synergy is a little bit lowered in this, but still is going to be huge. Most of these, all these are huge payoffs. Speaking of, let's look at our sack outlets. We've got Altar of Dementia. Sack at instant speed anytime. And the other part, you know, we're not milling a lot, but really we want that instant speed sack outlet in case we have to dig for something. Priest of Forgotten Gods, we're going to get to sack 2 other creatures. Any number of players each lose 2 life and sacrifice a creature. So it's removal, you're drawing card, you're sacrificing things. Korvold is drawing you cards. It's huge. Chittering Witch is going to not only be in this lane, kind of, to create 1/1s, but we can also pay 2 sack a creature and use it as removal as well, plus keywording with Korvold. Izoni, great late game, creates a ton of 1/1s, also pay 2, sack a creature, gain a life, draw a card. So again, the synergy with Korvold is huge. We already talked about Savvy Hunter, Gluttonous Troll, and Prosh, so let's look at the graveyard before we look at our utility stuff and our removal. Graveyard, Genesis, we're going to be able to return creature cards from your graveyard to your hand once that hits. Anger is going to let our Korvold on maybe like the 3rd or 4th recast, which happens a ton, which is why we have so much ramp. Have Haste, which will be huge. Dread Return, it sacrifices creatures. We're returning creatures from the graveyard to the battlefield. Sometimes I like to leave Korvold in the graveyard if we've got Dread Return in hand. Victimize, same thing. Choose 2 creature cards in the graveyard. Sack a creature. If you do, return both of those creatures to the battlefield. Golgari, return a permanent from your graveyard to your hand. Diabolic Intent, sacking a creature. This is more in the utility lane, but we're sacking a creature to go into our library and get any card, so the synergy's huge. And Reassembling Skeleton. There's not a better sack target. This thing comes back and we can sack it over and over again. Utility, Sylvan Library, because it's fantastic and it's just going to keep putting cards in our hand. Golden Egg. Golden Egg is a cuttable slot if you have like a pet card that you want to play in the Jund colors, but it's a good one because it replaces itself and it's a great sackable target. Rhythm of the Wild, haste on Korvold late game I think is worth it there. Swiftfoot Boots, again, protection and haste late game. Mimic Vat, because there's so much dying, we're killing so much, we're going to get a good target to put on Mimic Vat so that we can just reactivate this every time. And Revel in Riches. You saw how much in our deck creates treasure tokens. We can just win the game outright with this card. Lastly, Beast Within. Removal, straight up. Death Sprout. Removal plus ramp. Baked into a pie. This is a weird one, but it's a targeted removal that's also creating a food token that we can sacrifice to Korvold, so it's kind of pulling double duty. Taste of Death. Same thing. Each player sacking 3 creatures. We get 3 food tokens. So we're getting sack triggers and food tokens. So good. Butcher of Malakir is a little self-protection. Whenever it or another creature we control dies, everybody's got to sack a creature. Plague Crafter. I've comboed really great with this one, especially with Korvold on the battlefield, because you can just sacrifice the Plague Crafter to itself or any of your little 0/1s if you have those created. Removal for the entire board. Same thing with Fleshbag Marauder. That's essentially the same card right there. Putrefy. Artifact or creature. Done. Damnation. Things get out of control. Wipe the whole board. Golgari Charm. little versatility on this card. We can kill an enchantment, we can regenerate our creatures, or we can give everything -1/-1 if we need to do that. This, like Golden Egg, is a cuttable card if you have a pet card in Jund, or you have something that you want to run differently. Thrashing Bronodon, because it sacrifices with the Korvold, destroy an artifact or enchantment. Caustic Caterpillar, same kind of card as our dinosaur. And Fine Finality, this card is a house in this deck, because we can wipe the board, still swing through with Korvold, and we can go and get creatures that we've had to previously sack to Korvold back into our hand. And then that's it. We've got the man himself. Enters the battlefield or attack, sack a permanent. Whenever you sack a permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Korvold and draw a card. That is essentially the synergy of this deck and the cards that I choose to play. This is a very budget option for MTGO. I think you can get this entire deck for like less than $35. We've got the lands over here. It's pretty straightforward as far as what lands we're running. We're running some budget options. Enters the battlefield tapped. But we do have cards like Reliquary Tower. We draw a lot of cards with this deck, and we like the ability to have no maximum hand size. Really appreciate everybody watching. If you like the deck, let me know. Let me know what your less budget version runs. And make sure you check out the gameplay video. It is a sick free-for-all that you need to watch. Thank you. We appreciate it. Like I said, if you wouldn't mind hitting like and subscribe, it really helps us out. If you want to support us further, we've got a Patreon. The link is down in the description below. And don't forget that we are streaming most Tuesday and Thursday evenings over on Twitch if you want to come hang out with me or Jake. Thanks. I'm tapped out. We'll catch you later.